Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today we're coming at you with a Week 10 preview for the Big Ten. But before we get into the video, I am going to go ahead and ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help out the channel if you did. And now with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to start by starting off with the biggest game of the weekend in college football, Ohio State versus Penn State. The line for this game, despite being on the road, Ohio State is favored by 3.5 points. Vegas thinks this is going to be a low-scoring game. The over-under is set at 45.5. And I agree with that assessment. I think Penn State's defense is good. I think Ohio State's defense is very good, although it has dropped off from last year to this year, in my opinion. I could get into the macro of the overall matchups and the micro of naming individual players. I am going to name one player later on. However, the real story of this game are the two head coaches. I believe Ryan Day is 2-7, I think was the number, against top 5 teams, and James Franklin is 1-8. So these are two head coaches that struggle to win against top 5 opponents, playing each other as top 5 opponents. Now, when it comes to quality of coach, there is a clear and definitive and inarguable favor in the state of Ohio State. Ryan Day is an actual elite caliber football coach. James Franklin is good. More importantly, however, Penn State has some very obvious cracks on defense and offense that they have not played a team that can expose them for having those cracks. Well, Ohio State can. And what are those cracks, you might ask? Well, these are the cracks. Number one, they can't fucking run the football. They're not a very good running team. And Ohio State has a phenomenal run defense, genuinely one of the best in the country. They are a little bit more susceptible to the passing game, which is actually where Penn State is significantly better on offense, is passing the football. However, they also don't particularly have a whole lot of talent at the wide receiver position. You look at it on paper, they got a 5-star, a bunch of 4-stars. That doesn't mean shit. Those wide receivers are not NFL type of guys. And the fact remains, even though I do think they are overrated in terms of the scouting community right now, both of Ohio State's corners are going to be drafted if they declare for the NFL draft this year. Moving on, Penn State's pass blocking on the offensive line also hasn't been particularly great. It's been good so far this season for the most part. However, they also have not played a defensive line that is the caliber of Ohio State's. Specifically, JT Tuimoloau, the defensive end that is not going to go in the first round. He might not even go day 2, probably shouldn't either. However, he is going to look like the best player in college football in this game. Each of the past 2 seasons, and actually I think as a freshman too, he actually dominated this game. It was the only 3 games in his career where he looked anywhere close to a first-round pick. So I fully expect him to go off again for multiple sacks and just be a general disruptor on offense. Now, the thing that is different potentially for Penn State this year is that they do have a big-time talent at the quarterback position. You've watched Drew Allar throw the football. This kid's got arm talent for days. He's a big-time talent. Whether or not he's all the way there, I would lean more towards him not being all the way there, but maybe he puts it all together, and this is the game that allows him to turn the corner and really start getting talked about in that first-round conversation. Probably not this year. I think there are too many quarterbacks potentially in that conversation for him to go out this year. I think it would be better for him to wait and start another year next year for Penn State. From a NFL prospect perspective, I think that would be the smart choice for him. However, if he plays well in this game, I think you're going to start hearing some people talk about Drew Allar a little bit. in that first round conversation. I mean, hell, last week for the first half against Texas A&M, they were talking about Garrett Nussmeier being the best quarterback in the class. And I like Garrett Nussmeier, but he's not the best quarterback in the class. In fact, I firmly believe he won't even be in this class. I think he's going to return to LSU for another year. But that's just me, and as the namesake of the channel tells you, I'm just some asshole on the internet, and what do I know? Which leads me into my prediction for this game. I've got Ohio State 28, Penn State 14. I don't think this is close. Genuinely, I don't. I think Penn State has some staggering flaws offensively that they will not be able to overcome. And when it comes down to it on offense, even though I'm not a big believer in Will Howard, and you also have the offensive line issues, which admittedly, if you still had Kyle McCord, who is significantly better at throwing the football than Will Howard, with the caveat being that he has to have a clean pocket. You have offensive line problems. Your starting left tackle got hurt. And I believe your backup left tackle got hurt last week. Now, I don't know what that is looking like heading into this week. You might have to shuffle some pieces around. However, that is a massive question mark now. That was already, if we're going to be honest with you, kind of a question mark still anyway. However, I don't particularly think Penn State has the pieces on defense to exploit that problem. Is Abdul Carter really good? Yeah. Is he a guy that's going to take over a game? Probably not. They moved him from kind of a linebacker that blitzed role to being an edge rusher this year, and I think that was a mistake. Genuinely. I think he is better off being a linebacker that blitzes a lot rather than an actual edge rusher. I think that is a mistake, and I think he's hurt his draft prospects a little bit. And all that being said, Abdul Carter is just about the only guy that can get consistent pressure on this team. This defense plays sound football, but they are not a elite unit or even a great unit by any stretch of the imagination. They've also been phenomenally streaky on both sides of the ball. Ohio State has been remarkably consistent, and I believe that is probably going to be the difference in this game. I think Ohio State just pulls it off. I don't really think that this is going to be the year that Penn State overcomes the Ohio State curse, where they just can't beat Ohio State. You had the one victory in 2016, and then that's all you're going to get as long as James Franklin is the head coach. He used up all of his magic to get that one Big Ten title. Moving on to another intriguing matchup this week. Minnesota is favored by 3 points on the road at Illinois. This is an interesting line for me. That line says Vegas knows something about this game that nobody else knows. Because by all stretches of the imagination, Illinois should be favored in this game. They're, I believe, still ranked. They've got an NFL caliber quarterback, which is not something Minnesota can say. They've got NFL wide receivers, which is not something Minnesota can say. And they've got a defense that plays consistent, which is something Minnesota can say. In fact, Minnesota has a significantly better defense than Illinois does. However, Illinois has more talent all around, and they're at home, and they just got their ass kicked on the road against Oregon. So you figured this might be like a pride of the program kind of moment for Illinois. But nope, Vegas says Minnesota's going to win. And I'm actually inclined to believe. I think Minnesota has been maybe the most unlucky team in all of college football this year. They missed a relatively easy chip shot kind of field goal to beat a UNC team that had their starting quarterback hurt. And they then lost to Michigan on a bullshit offsides penalty on an onside kick that should not have been called, and no reasonable judge would have called it. That was nonsense, and it should be a reviewable play. However, it didn't go their way, just like UNC didn't go their way. Minnesota should be, what would they be, 8-1 now? That's what their record should be. 7-1, 8-1 right now. In which case, this would probably be a ranked matchup here. And as much as I like Illinois, as much as I wanted them to get to 10-2, I don't think they're going to. I've got the score in this game as Minnesota 24, Illinois 17. I think Minnesota pulls off a big win for their program. I think had they been able to handle business early on in the season, we're looking at this Minnesota team a lot differently than we are now. And people have sort of sold out Illinois the past few weeks. No, they're a good football team. They are genuinely a good football team. I think they deserve to be ranked right now. If they lose this game, probably not. If they win this game, they're staring down the barrel of 10-2 and potentially a top 20 rating to end the year. Nevertheless, I do think Minnesota is maybe not the better team, but the better matchup against Illinois, and I think they probably should win this game. Northwestern at Purdue is up next, and this is our third straight game that has a road favorite, and it's the third straight game that I actually agree with the road team being the favorite. The line for this game is Northwestern minus 1.5. The over-under is 46.5, so again, another low-scoring game. Purdue has looked better the past few weeks. They have made a change at quarterback, and I think that's a large reason why they look better. However, Northwestern, I think, is just too consistent. I think they're just flat out and straight up better coached than Purdue, and I think they have more talent than Purdue as well. I think this is going to be a tough game for Purdue to pull off. However, I do think they will also get some points on the board in this game. I've got the final score in this game as 35-24. When it comes down to it, Purdue just can't stop them while they're on defense. Up next, this game is not really that interesting, but also kind of interesting. Oregon at Michigan. The line for this game is Oregon minus 14.5. They are a 2-touchdown favorite. They also think it's going to be a low-scoring game, which is the over-under at 45.5. I don't agree with that assessment. I think there are going to be more points on the board than Vegas does. However, I think the line is just about right. Genuinely, I think somewhere between 14 and 17 points is probably where this game is going to end up. The fact of the matter is, and I've said this since long before the season even started, Oregon is a very, very bad matchup for Michigan. The fact of the matter is that the only real reason Michigan has been able to perform as well as they have been in pass coverage, and by the way, they've been performing horrendously, is because the defensive line gets pressure. Oregon runs a lot of quick stuff in the pass game, and that also negates blitzing. But guess what? Wink Martindale is still going to fucking blitz. And I think Dylan Gabriel's just going to pick apart this defense. He's going to have like 40 completions and like 250 yards because they're just throwing 5-yard slants every play. And Wink Martindale is just going to keep blitzing and blitzing because he doesn't know how to do anything else. Offensively, if Michigan can get what they got out of Davis Warren last week, then I do think they will be able to move the ball. But the fact remains is that they have not ran the ball effectively really against any team that matters. Oh, they had 300 yards against USC. Cool, USC sucks. We know that now. Just because that was a ranked matchup early on in the season doesn't mean it means anything. Okay, that game meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. I do not think Michigan will get a whole lot out of the run game. Maybe Donovan Edwards or Khalil Mullins can break off a big one, but I don't really think there's going to be any real sense of consistency in this game. I've got the final score for this game as Oregon 31, Michigan 17. When it comes down to it, I do not believe that Michigan can compete with this Oregon team right now. I think next week against Indiana is going to be a relatively similar affair. I get that a lot of people in the fan base are excited now because we beat Michigan State. Cool. The ceiling for this team is still probably 6-6. I still think they're going to lose at a minimum 3 of their 4 next games. And I don't really know what to think about that. The fact of the matter is that Sharon Moore's job might comes down to the Wednesday after the Ohio State game, which is National Signing Day. And you can kind of figure out what I mean by that. Up next is a sneaky good game. Indiana at Michigan State. Michigan State got embarrassed this last week by Michigan. There was no reason why they should have been down at halftime, 9-7, when they dominated the first half. They should have at least been up by 14-7. Like, at the absolute worst case scenario, that's what it should have looked like. But that's not what it ended up looking like. They were down 9-7, and Michigan ended up winning the game 24-17. This is going to be a team that is going to come off pissed off. They felt like they should have won last week. They felt like they were the better team last week. And to be honest with you, I am inclined to agree. Indiana is a team that won with their backup quarterback last week. It is a tremendously talented team. Potentially also a team that is looking ahead of week to Michigan, as that is a bigger game for them than Michigan State is. Now, the week after that, Ohio State is the biggest game on their schedule. However, I do think they are going to look at Michigan kind of like they looked at Nebraska, as a statement game. I think Indiana is probably one of the 10 best teams in the country. However, this week has bad matchup written all over it. There is a little bit of a cloud surrounding Rourke, the quarterback, and whether or not he's going to play. Right now, all of the insider information seems to be pointing that he actually has a really good chance to play. And I do think that is the difference in this game, because I'm going to give you the score here and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. I've got this as Indiana 35, Michigan State 31. I think Michigan State is going to come out motivated. I think they're going to come out ready to throw the football, which is something they should have done last week. And I don't particularly think Indiana has all that great of a defense in terms of being able to stop them, because really the only reason Michigan was able to do anything defensively is because they had a really good pass rush. Now, all that being said, when it comes down to it, I just flat out and straight up do not trust Childs to not turn the ball over at least once or twice in this game. I think there's a very, very real possibility that Childs' interception or a fumble like it was last week or something else is the difference in this game. However, if he doesn't turn the ball over, if Childs turns the ball over 0 times this week, which may or may not happen, I don't know. If that happens, there's no turnovers for Michigan State. They're going to win this game, in my opinion, even if Rourke plays, which I'm kind of assuming he is going to play, because that's kind of what all of the insiders for like Indiana and Michigan State are saying, is that Rourke is on track to play this week. I don't think he's going to be 100% by any means. However, I do think there's a very real possibility that this is an upset. And if Michigan State does end up winning this game, it's probably going to be because they don't turn the ball over or because Rourke doesn't play. I'm going to assume both those things happen because I think that's the most likely outcome. So I've got Indiana winning a much closer game than people think it ought to be. Next game on the docket is Nebraska at UCLA. I've got a lot less to say about this game than I have about other games. Nebraska should win. It would not shock me if UCLA pulled off the upset. In fact, that's what I think is going to happen. I think UCLA is going to win outright in this game. I got UCLA 20, Nebraska 17. And the main reason for that is Nebraska cannot win a fucking game when they get to 5 games. And also, I don't particularly think Matt Rule is that good of a coach. I think he's a solid coach. I think he'll do well at Nebraska. I'm not sure he's ever going to turn them into a consistent contender in the Big Ten, which I'm not sure they have even the potential to be that as a football program. However, when it comes down to it this week, I think this is a program building win for UCLA. That's what I think this is. I think this is a game that UCLA looks at, and if they turn it around next year and they end up being a competent football team, and then 2 years from now they end up being a good football team, all of a sudden you look back at this game and you say that was the turning point. That's what I'm predicting happens this week for UCLA. Am I going to end up with egg on my face with this take? Fucking probably. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just going with my gut on this one. I think UCLA pulls off the upset. This next game is an interesting game in the sense that I was fully prepared to pick this to be a Wisconsin blowout, even though it's at Kinnick, even though it's that night. Yeah, I know. The whole Kinnick at night thing. They had fucking 2 upsets against Michigan and Ohio State, and now all of a sudden people think it's a home field advantage. But, as I was saying, I think this game was on track to be a Wisconsin blowout in the rivalry game. Until Iowa announced the other day, I think it was yesterday, which would be Thursday, that Sullivan is going to start, not Cade McNamara, which is the correct decision. Sullivan was so much better than Cade McNamara last week. He got benched in the second half, McNamara that is. Sullivan came out and won them that football game. If Cade McNamara comes out, they might still win, but it's not going to look as convincing, okay? The fact is, I don't know what the offense is going to look like with Sullivan. I don't think it's going to be worse. I think it's going to be better. The question is how much better. Does it look significantly better? Does Wisconsin being able to prepare for Sullivan and his running ability change his effectiveness? I'm not sure. There are a lot more question marks to this game than I am used to having in a game this late in the season. This one is a close matchup to begin with, and with Sullivan, that adds an X factor on offense for Iowa. I just don't know what this game is going to look like. So this is largely going to be a gut decision, and right now, my gut says Wisconsin's going to win. So the score prediction is Wisconsin 21, Iowa 20. That's just because I think this is going to be a very, very close game. I think these are two, Big Ten West teams, so to speak, where the passing game is not going to be explosive. The running game is going to be effective, but it depends upon how effective it is, how well the defenses are, and whether or not you can make field goals or turn long drives into touchdowns. That is going to be the difference to this game. And the fact of the matter is that I do think Wisconsin has just been playing really, really well since USC, even last week against Penn State when Penn State won. Penn State's quarterback got hurt in the second half. He's going to play this week, though. It doesn't matter in terms of covering this conversation. However, I do think that they probably would have won by a wider margin. However, I don't think anybody's expecting Wisconsin to compete with a top 5 team in the country right now, like Penn State is. These are not top 5 teams in the country. Iowa's not a top 5 team in the country. I think this is a close game, but right now I just barely lean towards Wisconsin winning it. Our last matchup of the week, USC at Washington, and once again, there's another road favorite. USC is favored by 2.5 points traveling north to Washington. The over-under is 55.5. I think USC is a better team than their record. I'm going to come out and say that, flat out and straight up. I think Washington is also a better team than their record, for what it's worth. I think the thing that has fucked with these teams is the fact that they have to travel so much to all these goddamn places in the Big Ten. I think it was a mistake for both of them to join the Big Ten. I understand why they did it, money, but I think it's a mistake long term because the TV money doesn't mean as much as you think it does, especially when part of that TV money is going to end up going to the players on your roster. It means that there's just going to be significantly less money in the actual football program for the football program to do shit. But that's a topic for another day. We can talk about that some other time. As far as this game goes, I think these are two teams that, had they been playing in the Pac-12 from last year would have better records than they currently have. Mainly because the Pac-12 is significantly worse than the Big Ten, but mainly because of the travel. Now, that being said, this is a normal travel game for USC. USC's made this kind of travel before. It's not that much in terms of traveling. It's probably better even than going on the road to Utah, which is a place where we've seen USC lose before. However, when it comes to traveling, USC's probably used to it by this point. They're probably used to the long flights, the arriving early, sleeping in hotels, all of this kind of stuff. USC should be used to that by now. And flat out and straight up, I think USC's the better team than these two right now. However, Washington has the better matchup. Washington can run the football effectively. Coleman, their running back, is fantastic. I love him. He's phenomenal. Love that kid. He's going to be one of the biggest my guys, so to speak, whenever he decides to come out to the NFL draft. Love Coleman. And USC can't stop the fucking run. Washington's offensive line isn't great, but it's good enough for them to be able to run the ball against this defense. And I don't particularly see a way for USC to stop it. I've got Washington winning this game. I got the score as USC 24, Washington 27. I also think Washington does have a home stadium where there actually is a home field advantage, which is much rarer than you think it is. Ultimately, their ability to run the ball and their ability to play keep away with USC's offense is going to win them this game. Rutgers and Maryland are the two teams on the bye this week. Don't got a whole lot to say about them. They're into the bye. However, there are a lot of road favorites this week, and I think that means something, which is why I predicted a lot of them to win while headed on the road, except USC. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. To this point, I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagreed with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.